Dr. Ben Newman. I am a coronavirus researcher, not a monkeypox researcher. So I'm going to do my best here. So I've been having questions lately about monkeypox, what's going on with monkeypox, and I'll do my best. So here we go. At present, I believe we're a little over 6,000 cases of monkeypox spread around the world from this particular set of infections. The earliest recorded case, which you got to remember, the earliest recorded case may not be the first case there, but in this case it could be. They think was a person who came, he was a British person who had been in Nigeria and then came back to Britain and had the virus. It is a virus that is pretty commonly contracted in the grasslands you would find around the sort of wide part of Africa. So, sort of central and western Africa. There are two kinds of animals that we think carry it. One is called a rope squirrel, and the other is the giant Gambian pouched rat, which is kind of neat. Of those two, the giant pouched rat is actually eaten for food, and so that's a potential way that some people might come into contact with it. The virus has been found in both those animals in the wild, but only a couple of times, and honestly, it's not enough of an explanation for the cases. Most cases of monkeypox have definitely known source. Like it may be from there or it may be secondhand, like it from an animal to a person to another person, and then we pick it up, something like that. So, yeah, it has been tough to track down, surprisingly, in the modern age. I think if more money is thrown at this particular problem, we may well see a much more definitive solution to that soon. But yeah, it would be nice to know, right? At least if you know where it's coming from, you know what to do potentially to stop it. All right, so that's what it is. What's the sequence look like? Well, it's very similar to some versions of monkeypox that have come recently from Nigeria. And some of those were on people that came from Nigeria to Europe. And so the virus was actually picked up there. Some were actually picked up in West Africa. And it's not just Nigeria, it's all around there. It's just there are a lot of people in Nigeria. So, yeah, that tends to swamp the statistics, even though it's not particularly localized there. However, there are generally more cases, and there have been more wild, like animal to human cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo this year. There are, I think, last count, a little over 1,500 cases there. The variants of the virus that you tend to see in Western Africa, of this human monkeypox virus, are usually the ones that are associated with lower fatality rates. So in general, you're talking about something probably less than 10% fatality rate, maybe as low as 1%. Yeah. But it will depend. This always depends on who's the person, what's their condition. There are enough variables there that these percentages are only really rough guides. Now, the kind that you would find in Central Africa is associated with far more deaths and has killed, we're getting close to 100 people, I believe, this year that are known. This is certainly a part of the world, if this is happening in a village that's away from one of the major centers where you can do testing, there would potentially be cases there that would fly under the radar. So, an underestimate, very most likely. But that's the more dangerous one. And so, 10% is a pretty typical fatality rate for the Central African version, and it goes as high as like 20%. Mostly, though, the large airports that people fly to and from tend to be like Lagos, Nigeria, Western Africa. And so, usually, when a version of this virus gets out, it is the Western African version of the virus, which is going to get a new strain name shortly, apparently, according to the WHO. However, there are more cases of the potentially worse version of the virus, And really, the only thing preventing those from getting out is that the area of the world where they tend to occur is not very well connected at the moment. People are generally less mobile, less likely to travel to or from those areas. And relying on global isolation in this day and age to keep the world safe seems like a very short sighted plan. Something that's, yeah, a little house of very crumbly cards that are about to come down. So, yeah, I think it's something that is potentially worth watching in the future. So, what about monkeypox in general? Well, virus is similar to some relatives of smallpox virus. It's not a very close relative of smallpox itself. It's closer to like the mousepox virus and some of these other ones. But it has a lot of the same equipment. A lot of the genes are going to be in common between these viruses. And the good news there is that smallpox vaccination does work. There was a paper, a few years back, but it showed that smallpox vaccinations, I think they were looking 30 and 40 years after vaccination, there were still a reasonable amount of white blood cells, T cells, that were trained against smallpox, even in these people who had been vaccinated ages ago, as kids. So, yeah, there's a potential that if you are a little bit older than me and were actually vaccinated against smallpox, you would have some protection against monkeypox, which is good. Now, for everybody else, and I think they stopped vaccinating kids a year or two before I was born. For everybody else, there are the new vaccines. So the old vaccine was just is called vaccinia virus, and it's a live virus that you can put in, and you put it in the arm, and it's kind of like a little scar. It's about the size of a quarter. And making the scar actually causes enough of an inflammatory response around there that it calls in the right cells and gives you the right signals for the virus to grow. So you're putting a live virus in, the virus is definitely growing. Most of the time, that's fine. You get great immunity, and it's okay. But the problem with all these old technologies that for some reason everybody seems to like in vaccine, I don't know. I think the people that don't like vaccines like the old tech for vaccines. People that do like vaccines and take them probably prefer the new, and they should. Yeah, much safer. The old one had the risk that if it would take about a month to completely sort of scab over and have the scab fall off. Until that time, if you were to touch the scab or itch your arm or something like that and then rub your eye, then it was possible that you could have the virus transmit into your eye. And you got to remember that the eyes are just basically a part of the brain that sticks out through two holes in the front of your head. Yeah. So it's more or less a direct brain infection, and that could be very serious, sometimes fatal. The other problem was that occasionally in babies, when they would vaccinate, the virus would, instead of just staying localized, it would actually go systemic in the baby. Pretty rare. I think it was about 1 in 100,000, but still higher than you would like. And yeah, that would then be something that would be difficult to treat. So that's the old vaccine. And I would say if you have a choice, you don't want the old vaccine, probably. Works a little better, maybe, but not even that much better. So the new vaccine is a thing called MVA, Modified Vaccinia Ankara, like the city in Turkey. Yeah. And this is a version of vaccinia virus that has been grown so many times in chicken cells that it is able to start out growth in human cells, but it's not able to finish. So it's able to make the parts, but it's not able to put them together to come out of the cell to infect again. And so your cell gets the benefit of seeing all the different parts of the virus because the virus goes in, but it can't come back out. And yeah, been well studied, well tested, been used in hundreds of thousands of people. No problems. Yeah. So it looks like a very nice, safe vaccine. Other positives, you don't have to end up with the scar. So instead of that little scar, it's 2 injections, spaced apart. And then you're immune, and it should be comparable immunity, should last for a similar amount of time. So definitely something that can be stopped. The US has a few doses, I believe a few tens of thousands stored up, as do some other countries. They're using them in certain areas and certain communities, but for the most part, this is not a routine vaccination yet, and it's possible that this one may end up going onto the list of routine vaccinations eventually. It may be a good idea. But for right now, the people that do the cost benefit analysis have decided that the cost is greater than the benefit, I guess. Yeah. And so what that means is that in those situations, and when the cost goes up, when enough people are sick, then you start to see, they say, wow, now it outweighs. And so, yeah, the benefit is now greater. Yeah. Because we're avoiding this cost. Yeah, I had that backwards, but you get it. So it's not ever something that you look for, but this is how these things change. This is how these things happen. So, fine. Um, who is getting this virus? So, started out, there was a large event, I believe, on one of the Canary Islands, which everybody keeps saying it's in Europe. There were a lot of Europeans there, and it is under nominal Spanish control, but it's off the coast of Africa, and I feel like that's not good geography to call that Europe. And anyway, at this particular one, it was a big, I believe, Pride celebration, and I think there were 80,000 people there, and that's where a lot of the spread took place. Probably, if you had a similar thing, you could have a giant jam festival up in Vermont. You could have a big dance party in Miami, and probably you would have seen roughly the same level of spread. It's more about a lot of people being close together than anything to do with a particular community, I think. But for better or worse, no, not better or worse, just the way it spread, it has started out in the community of what they call men who have sex with men. So you're not gay necessarily, but yeah. Um, and that's where it started. And so you had a lot of people that were saying, well, fine, it can't get to me. Obviously, it's confined to this community. I don't do that, so therefore it's okay. But of course, that's exactly what people said at the beginning with AIDS. And there have been several bacterial outbreaks that followed the exact same course because people have families. People, yeah, have relatives. This virus can be spread through the air. It can be stopped with a mask, but people generally don't. And yeah, sure, if you're having very close contact with no mask, a lot of skin to skin contact too, those are multiple ways it could spread. But yeah, it is spreading. So they have cases now in children in Spain just recently. And the worry is that this virus will get to pregnant women. With monkeypox, as far as I am able to tell, there's only one paper dealing with monkeypox during pregnancy in humans, and this was collecting together 4 case studies where they know that the mother was infected while she was pregnant. In 2 cases, the fetus just died and was spontaneously aborted. Yeah, so it was just death of the baby. In the 3rd case, the baby was born, but it was covered in pox sores, basically, and was dead. It was stillborn. So, yeah, carried it all the way to term, which is absolutely heartbreaking and terrible. And in the 4th case, the baby was okay. Most likely, in that case, the virus did not get to the placenta. Most likely, it was in the mother, and I don't believe in any of these cases they checked whether it had got into the placenta. Now, this is similar to what we see with vaccinia virus, which is a related virus. So until we have good monkeypox data, that's probably the best match. And what we see there is that, yeah, this is a virus that grows very well in the uterus and very well in the placenta. Doesn't particularly do well in the baby, but if it is destroying the baby's home/source of food, that almost always ends up being fatal to the baby. Yeah, so this is one of those cases where generally, the mother would be likely to do better if the baby was aborted. Yeah, which is a terrible choice. I mean, if you're pregnant, you got monkeypox and in animal studies, anyway, with mice, the young mice never survive when the mother is infected and it gets to the placenta. So until we know better, that's the most likely case for people. But it may be a little different. It's a little different in different animals. But yeah, with the big changes in reproductive rights in the U.S., yeah, that's a thing you gotta factor in. If we're dealing with a world that has monkeypox, this is something that may come up. It's not the only virus that does stuff like this. So there you go. That's kind of a catch up on at least most everything I can tell you about monkeypox right now. There have only been a few papers describing the new sequences. There has not been a giant rush of funding and research on monkeypox. I think there's still only a few places where people can work with this, but that may be something that changes. The more a virus is in the public eye, the more funding is generally dedicated to try and stop it. And yeah, funding is what drives research. Research drives what we know, and what we know can help. It can protect people. So there you go. Yeah, so we're creeping along steadily in terms of understanding this, but nowhere near a full understanding. There are lots of other interesting features about pox viruses in general, like the way they replicate and how they make a little shell and then sort of collapse it like a deflated soccer ball. But that's all for virology class. I think this is plenty for right now. So yeah, thanks very much. And if you had any questions about it, I hope that answered some of them anyway. Stay safe out there. This has been Ask Dr. Ben.